Before there were kings, cities, or even fire, there was silence. The kind of silence that hums through the bones of the earth itself. Imagine a world where Africa wasn't yet the cradle of civilization, but a restless experiment of wind, dust, and instinct, where every sunrise could mean survival, and every sound in the tall grass could mean death. It is 4.7 million years ago, long before Homo sapiens ever walked upright. The creatures who would one day become us, small, half-ape, half-human beings, are learning for the first time what it means to endure. The landscape of that forgotten world is almost unrecognizable. The air is thicker, humid, full of the scent of wet earth and crushed vegetation. Volcanoes still breathe smoke into the sky, and the ground trembles often with the pulse of a young planet. Herds of ancient elephants with straight tusks roam across vast plains of golden grass, followed by flocks of enormous birds whose wings cast shadows over the savannas. At night, the stars appear sharper, closer, like cold eyes watching from the void. And in this raw, dangerous theatre, the first ancestors of humanity, Australopithecus anamensis, small-bodied and wide-eyed, are learning what no creature before them had ever truly mastered: how to adapt, not just to survive the moment, but to shape the future. They live without tools, without language, without fire, yet within them stirs something far more powerful than claws or fangs, a curiosity, a spark that will one day ignite civilization itself. Their world is both brutal and breathtaking, a place where survival is not about strength alone, but about intuition, memory, and cooperation. Every movement, every choice, every sound in the night is a lesson written into the human story. In the dawn haze, when the first light touches the grasslands of East Africa, a small family of early hominins awakens beneath an acacia tree. The air smells of damp soil and distant rain, and dew clings to their fur. They sleep in the crook of the branches, not out of comfort but for safety. On the ground below, a leopard prowls silently through the underbrush, its golden eyes reflecting the first rays of morning. These early beings have no shelters, no weapons, no language to warn each other of danger, but they have instinct, a deep, unspoken understanding that the world is not merciful, and that to live they must watch, listen, and learn. They climb down cautiously, their long arms and curved fingers perfect for gripping bark and branches. On two legs they walk clumsily, swaying slightly, still half in the trees and half on the earth. The world around them is alive with noise. The trumpeting of elephants, the distant cries of giant birds, the whisper of grass as a herd of grazing antelope passes nearby. Every sound is information. Every scent, a message. To survive, they must interpret this living code. Food is scarce and unpredictable. They search for roots, fruits, and insects, testing each morsel with cautious curiosity. Sometimes they follow baboons or other primates, watching what they eat and imitating them. When the dry season comes, rivers shrink into muddy pools, and thirst becomes their greatest enemy. It is here that ingenuity begins to form, not through deliberate invention, but through desperation. They learn to dig for hidden roots, rich in water. They learn to follow vultures, leading them to carcasses abandoned by lions, where bits of marrow remain locked in bone. And occasionally, when lightning strikes a tree and sets the grass ablaze, they watch, terrified but fascinated, as fire consumes the land, not yet realizing that this destructive force will one day become their greatest ally. But in this era, there are no tools to fight, no language to organize, and no fire to warm. Only the slow, steady rhythm of survival. Still, in that rhythm, something ancient begins to stir, an awareness that the world can be understood, that every pattern, the migration of herds, the ripening of fruit, the cry of a predator, is not random, but part of a vast, repeating cycle. And it is through observing these cycles that the first spark of intelligence begins to flicker behind their dark eyes. As they move through the tall grass, their shadows stretch long and thin in the afternoon light. They are small figures in a vast wilderness, yet they carry within them the silent promise of everything to come: the firelight, the music, the language, the faith. The story of humanity is still only a whisper carried on the wind, waiting to take form. As the centuries pass, the earth itself begins to shift. The forests thin out into wide grasslands, rivers carve deeper valleys, and the air grows drier. The early hominins, descendants of those curious tree dwellers, now walk more confidently on two legs, their hands freed for something new, creation. The world around them is changing, and with it, so are they. In this vast, open savanna, where danger can be seen from miles away, survival no longer belongs to the fastest or the strongest, but to those who can think ahead. The first tool is not a weapon of conquest, but of necessity. A simple, broken stone picked up from the riverbed. A sharp edge glints faintly in the sunlight, as one of these creatures, perhaps without understanding why, uses it to cut through the skin of a fallen antelope. The others watch, silent but alert, as the smell of blood fills the air. For the first time, bone and sinew give way to a mind's intention rather than to claws or teeth. The sound of cracking bones, the dull thud, the soft shatter of marrow echoes across the valley. It is a small moment, almost nothing in the scale of cosmic time, but in that moment, humanity takes its first true step forward. With tools, the world changes. A sharp stone means access to what was once unreachable. Meat, marrow, and fat, the building blocks of a stronger brain. The hands that once clung to branches now hold potential, and the eyes that once only watched predators now study patterns. How to strike, how to break, how to shape. From this small discovery comes cooperation, born not from affection but from necessity. When they work together, they live longer. Imagine a dry afternoon along the shores of Lake Turkana. The sun beats down with merciless intensity, heat shimmering above the cracked earth. A small band of hominins moves slowly through the golden grass. They are quiet, communicating through gestures and soft calls, a rudimentary language of survival. Ahead, the scent of decay drifts on the breeze. A dead zebra lies near a riverbank, already claimed by vultures and hyenas. But the hyenas are gone now, full and lazy in the shade. The group approaches carefully. One carries a shard of stone, sharp and grey. Another watches the horizon for movement. When the coast is clear, they begin. One holds a leg steady, while the other scrapes at the flesh, learning where to press, how to separate tendon from bone. They work quickly, alert to the sound of rustling grass. When the task is done, they retreat to a patch of shade and eat in silence, not out of greed, but respect for the fragile balance that allows them to live. They know, in a way that cannot yet be spoken, that every meal is borrowed time. Over generations, this cooperation becomes instinct. Mothers teach daughters how to recognize edible plants. Fathers and sons learn which stones break cleanly. The old watch the young and remember, not with words but through repetition. Knowledge passes like a secret rhythm through the bones of each new generation, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the first community begins to form. At night, they gather near the safety of rocks and cliffs, pressed close for warmth. The darkness is thick, alive with distant roars and cries, but in the circle of their bodies there is something new. Comfort. They touch, they share food, they mimic each other's expressions. Fear binds them, but so does tenderness. The first laughter may have sounded like a cough, rough and unsure, but it was enough to mean I am here with you. This is the beginning of everything we would one day call civilization. Not temples, not writing, not kings, but the quiet decision to stay together when the night falls. To share what little they have, to warn each other of danger, to recognize even dimly that another's life matters to their own. The world is still savage, the night still endless, but within that circle of warmth something sacred has taken root, the first spark of humanity. The wind has changed again. Seasons that once followed a gentle rhythm now turn cruel and unpredictable. The rains come later, the dry seasons stretch longer, and the grasslands wither under the burning sun. The early humans, leaner now and hardened by scarcity, begin to move, following herds, chasing storms, crossing rivers that carve through volcanic stone. Each migration is a gamble, each sunrise both a promise and a warning. But the ones who learn to adapt, to watch the movement of clouds, to sense the migration of animals, become the quiet architects of survival. They are no longer scavengers. Hunger has taught them patience, and patience has taught them courage. From the sharpened stones once used to scrape marrow, they begin to craft something new. The spear, a long branch, hardened by fire, and tipped with chipped flint. It is still clumsy, crude, but it changes everything. Now they are not only watchers of predators, they can become them. Picture them on the plains at dawn, crouched low in the grass, the air vibrating with the hum of life. In the distance, a herd of antelope grazes, their slender bodies shimmering in the morning light. The hunters wait, muscles tense, eyes locked on their target. One gestures, a subtle flick of the wrist, and the others understand. There is no spoken language, but intention is enough. The world holds its breath. Then, with sudden precision, the first spear flies. It does not kill, not yet, but it wounds. And for the first time, the balance of power on the savannah shifts. The chase that follows is long and brutal. Blood stains the dust. Sweat glistens on their skin. Hearts pound in rhythm with the earth. When the animal finally falls, there is no triumph, only awe. They kneel beside the body, breathing heavily, aware that something sacred has occurred, life taken not by chance, but by choice. This moment marks a new covenant between humanity and nature. From now on, to eat is to take responsibility. To survive is to command the world in small, deliberate ways. But perhaps the most transformative discovery does not come from the hunt, but from the sky. One evening, lightning splits a dry acacia, and the world erupts in flame. The tribe watches from a distance, as fire devours the grass, its heat pressing against their faces, its roar echoing through their bones. The flames terrify them, the smell, the sound, the brightness against the black. But one, bolder than the rest, approaches when the storm passes. He lifts a smouldering branch, holding it at arm's length, the light trembling in his hands. The others stare, mesmerized. The fire crackles and spits, but it does not attack. Instead, it offers warmth, protection, and a strange beauty. They gather around it cautiously, and when the cold night descends, they realize they are no longer powerless. The beasts that once prowled the edges of their sleep now stay away, afraid of this new flickering sun. And so, for the first time, humanity claims dominion over the darkness. They feed the fire with dry twigs and leaves, learning to keep it alive, whispering to it as though it were a living spirit. It becomes the heart of their camp, a place of safety, of stories, of learning. The flames reflect in their eyes like mirrors of evolution itself. Around it, they begin to see one another more clearly. Faces lit by orange light, gestures softened by warmth, shadows dancing behind them like ghosts of what they once were. At night, the fire speaks in its own language. The hiss of sap, the crack of wood, the soft sigh of smoke rising toward the stars. They learn to mimic those sounds, to create rhythm and voice, the early music of communication. And in those glowing circles of light, words are being born, slow and uncertain, yet powerful enough to shape thought. The hunter and the firebringer, these two forces will define them for thousands of generations. One gives them food, the other, meaning. One demands courage, the other, imagination. Together they awaken a truth that will echo through every age of humanity, that survival is no longer about instinct alone, but about the stories we tell around the fire, stories that teach, remember, and keep the darkness at bay. The nights have grown quieter now. The fire has become more than warmth. It is memory. Each flame carries a story, each ember a lesson. Around it, small groups gather beneath the endless African sky, their faces flickering in orange and gold. The dangers of the wilderness remain, the roar of lions, the chill of wind, the endless uncertainty of survival, but something profound is changing. They are no longer just surviving together, they are belonging together. The tribe is being born. Over time, families merge, guided by instinct and the subtle pull of safety in numbers. There are those who hunt, those who gather, those who guard the young. The elderly, once left behind when they could no longer walk, now sit close to the fire, their eyes distant and knowing. Their memory becomes a map of where the rivers bend, where fruit trees bloom, where danger sleeps in shadow. And slowly respect begins to take form, not yet as morality, but as recognition. This one has seen many seasons. Listen to them. When the sun sets and the fire crackles, they begin to perform movements, slow at first, rhythmic, instinctive, the dance of imitation. One mimics the chase, another the kill, another the rain. These gestures become ritual, a shared understanding of the forces that govern their fragile world. Through these movements, they are learning to make sense of the chaos, to give shape to fear, to honor the unseen. In the silence between dances, someone lifts a stone painted with ochre, red like blood, warm like life. They draw lines on the cave wall, a handprint, a herd, a spiral of meaning. They do not yet know that they are inventing art, only that it feels necessary, that to leave a mark is to whisper, "I was here," into eternity. The first artists are not kings or poets, but survivors who dare to imagine something beyond themselves. One evening, a great storm rises on the horizon, turning the sky the color of bruised iron. The tribe huddles close, the wind tearing through the plains, thunder rumbling across the earth. A lightning bolt splits the sky, striking a distant tree. In that moment of terror, they see power, raw, divine, beyond comprehension. When the storm passes, they look to the heavens with new eyes. Something has begun to stir in the space between their breath and the stars. This is the dawn of spirit. They begin to bury their dead, not to hide them, but to honor them. They lay flowers beside the fallen, small stones on the chest, food by the hands. Perhaps they believe the soul continues, or perhaps it is only love refusing to fade. Either way, it is faith in its earliest form, the belief that something unseen, eternal, connects all living things. In the glow of the fire, mothers hum softly to their infants. Fathers watch the flames rise and fall like the heartbeat of the earth. They tell the story of the hunt, of the storm, of the first fire, and as words take shape, so does meaning. The tribe begins to imagine why the sun returns each morning, why the moon changes shape, why the stars never fall. Every answer becomes a story. Every story becomes a truth. And so, in a world still ruled by tooth and claw, humanity discovers something no other creature possesses, not sharper tools or stronger muscles, but the ability to dream, to see the invisible, to find order in the mystery. When they close their eyes at night, they see ancestors walking through the tall grass, their voices carried on the wind. They see spirits in the flames, faces in the clouds, messages written in the flight of birds. The world around them has not changed, but their perception of it has. What was once wilderness has become sacred ground. The first prayer is not spoken. It is felt. A deep, wordless gratitude for the sunrise, for the meal, for another heartbeat in the vast silence of the world. And thus the seed of civilization is sown, not in stone, not in cities, but in the quiet reverence of a people learning to look beyond survival and into the soul of existence itself. The earth turns, ages shift, and the winds of time sweep over continents like invisible tides. The small tribes of early humans, once confined to narrow valleys and ancient forests, begin to wander farther than any creature before them. Their curiosity is endless, an invisible thread pulling them toward the unknown. They follow rivers that spill into vast deltas, trace herds across deserts that shimmer like copper, and climb ridges from which the world seems to stretch into eternity. Each step away from the old hunting grounds is a gamble. Yet it is in this restless wandering that humanity begins to evolve, not just in body but in mind. The once simple stone flakes become elegant hand axes, shaped with precision and purpose. Each blow of stone against stone is deliberate, rhythmic, a quiet act of mastery. Sparks of genius flicker through their hands, the same sparks that one day will build cathedrals and cities. The fire no longer terrifies them. It bends to their will. They carry embers wrapped in bark and moss, preserving flame as they travel, like a sacred heartbeat from one generation to the next. Fire becomes home, a circle of safety that can exist anywhere in the caves of the Nile, on the cliffs of Ethiopia, beneath the icy stars of the Caucasus. Wherever they go, the fire follows. It cooks their food, warms their young, hardens their tools. It turns night into a softer thing, one that can be endured rather than feared. Over millennia, these wandering clans begin to change, not only in form but in thought. Their eyes, sharper now, scan the horizon with the quiet intelligence of strategy. They know when the rains will come, where the animals migrate, how to read the pattern of clouds. Each discovery is shared, not hoarded. Knowledge becomes their most precious tool. And with knowledge comes organization. The group is no longer a fragile gathering of bodies, but a living system, guided by memory, bound by story. The strongest hunters no longer fight for dominance alone. They lead, protect, and teach. Those who remember the old paths become guides. Those who craft the best tools become teachers. Slowly, hierarchy and purpose emerge, not through tyranny but through trust. Yet, the mind, once awakened, cannot stop searching. Beneath the stars, they begin to wonder why the world behaves as it does, why the rains return, why death takes, why fire burns yet gives life. Questions multiply like seeds in fertile soil. Their rituals become more complex, their dances more symbolic. Around the fire, they reenact a hunt, not just to remember it, but to honor it, to transform necessity into ceremony. The first myths are born here, whispered explanations for lightning, the moon, the spirits of the dead. Somewhere near a great river, perhaps the Omo, perhaps the Awash, a child watches as the elders carve marks into the dirt with a stick, mapping out where the herds were last seen. She does not yet know that she is witnessing the earliest form of communication, that one day these marks will become symbols, and symbols will become writing. But she understands that knowledge can live outside the body, that memory can be recorded. It is a revelation that will outlive her by millions of years. Seasons pass, generations come and go. The world cools, glaciers form and retreat, and the humans, now Homo erectus, spread beyond Africa. Through the ancient corridors of the Middle East, they move into Asia, into Europe, into islands no other animal dares to reach. They learn to weave clothing from hides, to hunt in coordinated groups, to store food for leaner times. Firelight flickers in caves from Georgia to Java, and in those flickers, the human story begins to take shape across continents. They are still small against the vastness of nature. One lightning strike, one famine, one predator could erase them entirely, and yet, something in them refuses extinction. The mind, once lit, will not go dark again. Each discovery builds upon the last, from tool to weapon, from flame to hearth, from gathering to trade. They learn to shape stone, bone, and wood into harmony with purpose. They carve small figures of animals and women, not out of vanity but reverence. They look upon these carvings as symbols of fertility, protection, mystery. The sacred and the practical are no longer separate. To hunt well is to live, to remember is to worship. At last, as the Ice Age dawns and the world shifts once more, humankind stands on the threshold of something unimaginable. They have conquered hunger, tamed fire, built community, and woven spirit into survival. They do not yet know it, but the foundation of civilization, the seed of art, law, agriculture, and faith, has already been planted deep within them. And as the night falls over their camp, somewhere along the banks of an ancient river, They sit beside their fire, the same fire lit by ancestors who once trembled before lightning, and gaze at the stars with a quiet sense of recognition. For the first time in history, a creature on Earth looks at the heavens not with fear, but with wonder. The sky grows pale, and the breath of the world turns to frost. The age of ice descends like a slow, inevitable tide, reshaping every valley, every mountain, every creature that dares to live upon the earth. The warm grasslands of Africa fade behind them, replaced by frozen plains and the silence of snow. Herds of mammoths wander through the white wilderness, like moving fortresses, and packs of dire wolves prowl the ridges beneath skies the color of stone. It is a world of endurance, where the cold itself is a predator, invisible but relentless. The early humans who brave this era are no longer the fragile wanderers of old. They are tool makers, firekeepers, thinkers, wrapped in the hides of the beasts they've hunted. They move across the tundra in small bands, their footprints marking paths that future civilizations will never know existed. Each fire they light is an act of rebellion against extinction, a small golden heartbeat in a frozen universe. Shelter becomes sacred. In the howling blizzards of Europe and Asia, they learn to carve protection out of the bones of mammoths, to stitch animal skins into tents that rustle like whispers in the wind. In caves they layer the walls with soot and color, ochre, charcoal, red clay, transforming rock into canvas. These painted beasts, bison, reindeer, lions, are not decorations but prayers, an attempt to speak to the forces that rule their lives. To paint an animal is to honor it, to call it back, to give thanks for its sacrifice. Inside these caves, the flames flicker and dance across the walls, making the painted figures seem alive. The humans sit in silence, watching their creations move in the trembling light. In that trance-like stillness, something extraordinary begins to happen. The birth of imagination as a shared experience. They are no longer just living, they are remembering, interpreting, creating. The cold teaches them intimacy. Each night they gather close, pressed against one another for warmth. The bonds between them deepen, not only of survival but of affection. They begin to recognize faces, to miss those who are gone, to feel grief in a way no other creature does. Love and loss become part of what it means to be human. Language begins as a rhythm, a pattern of sound and gesture, a hum for comfort, a cry for warning, a whistle for direction. Over generations, these sounds become structure, meaning, identity. Around the fire, stories unfold, not yet myths of gods and heroes, but of hunts, storms, births, and dreams. Each word spoken carries power, preserving memory beyond death. For the first time, knowledge can travel farther than a single lifetime. In this frozen age, humanity begins to master time itself. They carve notches into bone to count the days of the moon, to track the passing of seasons, to predict when the herds will return. They learn to prepare, to store, to plan, the foundations of thought that will one day build empires. The animal's hide becomes clothing, its bones tools, its sinews thread. Nothing is wasted. Necessity has taught them creativity, and creativity has taught them survival. But the greatest invention of all is invisible: cooperation. Alone, no human can survive the ice. Together, they can endure anything. The tribe becomes an organism greater than any one life, a network of strength, memory, and compassion. The hunters risk themselves not for glory but for the group. The mothers share food with the old teach the young the patterns of stars. A sense of we begins to take root, a fragile but unstoppable force that will reshape the world. And still, the fire burns. The same fire that once terrified their ancestors now defines their identity. They have carried it across deserts, through storms, into the heart of the Ice Age. It is no longer just a tool. It is a symbol of endurance, of hope, of the inner light that refuses to die. One evening, in a cave somewhere in southern France or the steppes of Siberia, a small child sits by the fire, tracing patterns in the ash with her finger. The tribe is asleep. Outside, The wind screams. She looks up at the stars, cold, ancient, unreachable, and feels something stir within her chest. A question, a yearning. She does not have words for it yet, but she senses that the world is vast, that the soul is infinite, and that she somehow belongs to both. That quiet wonder, born in the depths of an Ice Age night, will echo through every generation to come, for beneath the snow and bone, beneath the struggle and the hunger, humanity has discovered its greatest strength, not fire, not tools, not language, but the ability to hope. The ice begins to weep, slowly at first, drops falling from vast frozen cliffs. Then all at once, rivers roar back to life, cutting new paths through the softening earth. Valleys that had slept for centuries awaken under the sun's rebirth, and plains of green begin to bloom where glaciers once ruled. The great beasts of the Ice Age retreat northward. The mammoths fade into legend. The saber-toothed cats vanish into the silence of extinction. The world is changing, and humanity must change with it. The air is warmer now, gentler, scented with soil and rain. For the first time in millennia, survival no longer demands constant movement. The people, scattered bands of hunters and gatherers, begin to pause. They find rivers that never dry, valleys where the soil is rich, and forests that offer both shade and fruit. They pitch their tents not for a night, but for a season, then for a year, and eventually forever. The first settlements are born, not from conquest, but from exhaustion and hope. At the edge of a river in what will one day be called Mesopotamia, a woman presses a seed into damp soil. She does not know that she is performing the act that will change the world. She only knows that the seed might grow, that the green stalk might feed her child. Days pass, then weeks, and one morning she sees a small shoot breaking through the ground, trembling in the wind. The miracle of agriculture has begun. With crops comes time, the strange new luxury of waiting. No longer chasing the herds, they learn to watch the seasons, to understand the rhythms of growth and decay. Grain becomes sustenance, then storage, then surplus. For the first time, humanity tastes stability, and with it comes imagination. Freed from the endless hunger of the hunt, their minds turn inward toward invention. They fashion clay pots to hold their harvest, shaping them with hands still stained from the hunt. They build walls of mud and stone, not to cage themselves, but to keep the wildness at bay. Smoke curls from the roofs of the first homes, and laughter, something rare and fleeting in the old world, becomes part of daily life. Community deepens into society. The tribe that once numbered 20 now swells to hundreds. New roles emerge. Gatherers, potters, builders, storytellers. The hunters, once the center of the world, now share their power with those who understand the soil. Leadership becomes more complex, no longer measured by strength, but by wisdom, by fairness, by the ability to maintain peace. As they plant and harvest, they begin to look upward once more. The stars, once guides for migration, now become calendars. They mark the solstice, the equinox, the seasons of sowing and reaping. The heavens take on meaning again, not as mystery alone, but as a mirror of their new lives. The moon's cycle dictates when to plant. The sunrise becomes a promise of renewal. In this fertile world, the imagination blooms as wildly as the land itself. They carve symbols into stone, lines and spirals that echo the flow of rivers, the movement of stars. They paint figures with outstretched hands, perhaps gods, perhaps ancestors. The invisible world, the realm of spirit, grows closer, more personal. Shrines appear beside the hearths, small piles of stones or bones to honor those who came before. The first prayers are whispered, not for survival, but for blessing. But even as life grows easier, complexity brings its own storms. With settlement comes ownership, and with ownership comes conflict. Boundaries, once meaningless to wanderers, now become sacred. Whose land is this? Whose harvest? Whose water? The questions are new, but the emotions are ancient. fear, pride, love. And so, even as the seeds of civilization sprout, the roots of power and hierarchy begin to twist around them. Still, the earth is generous, and the people are learning. Villages become networks. Networks become cultures. The first trade begins: salt for flint, grain for shells, obsidian for stories. These exchanges carry more than objects. They carry ideas. Along the rivers of the Near East, humanity begins to weave itself into a tapestry that will one day stretch across the globe. At night, they gather around the same fires their ancestors once kindled in the cold, though the air is now warm and the horizon fertile. They tell the story of how the world melted, how their ancestors hunted beasts of ice and spoke to the spirits of fire. The children listen with wide eyes, watching the flames twist into shapes that almost seem alive. The journey from the caves to the village has taken millions of years, yet within the glow of that fire, it feels like one long heartbeat, a steady rhythm pulsing through every age of humanity. And as dawn rises over fields heavy with grain, one truth becomes clear: the struggle to survive has become the struggle to build. The rivers have become highways of destiny. Along the banks of the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Nile, and the Indus, the first cities rise like islands of purpose amid the endless dust. What were once clusters of huts have grown into living organisms, breathing, trading, remembering. Smoke rises in steady columns. The clang of stone and metal echoes through the morning air. Humanity, after millions of years of wandering, has built its first heartbeat of civilization. Here the soil itself seems to hum with potential. Canals split the land into veins of water and grain. Men and women move through the fields, planting, harvesting, singing rhythmic chants that align their movements with the pulse of the earth. The air smells of barley and wet clay. The horizon flickers with the shimmer of heat. For the first time, people are not just surviving the world, they are shaping it. Yet, as the walls of these new cities climb higher, the wilderness grows quieter. The forests that once sheltered their ancestors are now cut down to feed fires and build temples. The animals that once ruled the plains retreat into myth. The world that once taught them reverence is being replaced by a world of ownership, measurement, and control. Humanity has exchanged uncertainty for structure, a bargain that will define the next 10,000 years. In the temples of Sumer and Egypt, priests lift their eyes to the heavens and see patterns in the stars. They speak of gods who walk among them, of sky fathers and river mothers, of storms that think and fires that judge. The invisible world, once whispered through ritual and instinct, now wears names and faces. Religion becomes not just faith, but governance. Kings claim descent from the divine. Their words carry the weight of eternity. Beneath these temples, artisans labor in the shadows, carving stories into wet clay, records of trade, of harvest, of tribute. The first writing is born, not to sing, but to count. Symbols of wheat, flocks, jars, and names pressed into tablets by careful hands. Yet in those small marks lies the seed of human memory, the power to preserve thought beyond death. What began as tallies will soon become poetry, law, philosophy. The people who once painted animals in caves now sculpt gods in stone. They adorn their homes with idols of fertility and protection. They bury their dead with possessions, believing in an afterlife that mirrors their world, orderly, fertile, eternal. The idea of the soul, once only a feeling, now becomes doctrine. The city has not just tamed nature, it has begun to define heaven. But beneath the grandeur, the old instincts remain. In the alleys of Uruk, in the courtyards of Memphis, in the shadow of ziggurats, children still play with stones. Women still whisper prayers before childbirth. The hunter's blood still hums when thunder rolls. Even as humanity crowns itself with civilization, it cannot forget the rhythm of the wild that lives inside its bones. The rivers flood and recede, leaving behind both life and loss. Droughts come, and cities learn humility once more. The earth, generous yet indifferent, reminds them that mastery is illusion. A single failed harvest can undo decades of progress. In those moments of hunger and fear, they return to the old ways, the fire, the circle, the prayer to unseen forces. Civilization may have risen, but the wild still holds its roots. At night, from the high walls of their cities, people gaze upon the horizon and see only darkness. Beyond the lights of the temples lies a world they once called home, forests, deserts, winds that still whisper in the language of their ancestors. A few still venture there, hunters, wanderers, dreamers. They return with stories of freedom and danger, of beasts that seem half real, half divine. In their hearts they carry something that no wall can contain, the memory of what it meant to live with the world, not above it. The dawn of civilization is not a victory, but a transformation. Humanity has learned to grow food, to write, to pray, to rule. But in doing so, it begins to lose something older, the intimacy with the earth, the quiet understanding that every life is borrowed, not owned. The wild retreats, but it never disappears. It lingers in our blood, in our dreams, in the flicker of every flame. As dawn breaks over the first great city, smoke rising like incense to the gods, a priest inscribes a new tablet, a farmer ties his first sheaf of wheat, and a child stands at the edge of the river, watching the current flow. The water glimmers under the sun, ancient, eternal, carrying with it the ghosts of those who once walked barefoot through the tall grass, long before walls and kingdoms and words. And so humanity stands at the threshold of history, its heart divided between two worlds, one built of stone and promise, the other of wind and memory. The golden age of the early cities does not last forever. Beneath the glow of temples and the murmur of markets, a quiet imbalance begins to grow, one that no one yet understands, though it will haunt humanity for all eternity. The earth, once a companion and teacher, is now treated as a resource. Rivers are drained for irrigation, forests felled for brick and bronze, fields ploughed until the soil turns to dust. The world that once gave freely now groans beneath the weight of its children. The first warning comes not with thunder, but with silence. The rivers, once generous and swollen, begin to shrink. Crops fail under pitiless suns. The once green plains of Mesopotamia crack open, dry and grey. People look to the skies for answers, but the heavens are indifferent. The priests, desperate to restore order, command greater sacrifices, more animals, more offerings, more obedience. The gods who once walked beside them now demand fear instead of faith. Civilization, for all its brilliance, has forgotten the wisdom of the hunt and the humility of the fire. The old instincts, patience, adaptability, respect, have been replaced by control. The farmer now sees the land not as a living thing, but as a machine. And when the machine fails, panic spreads like plague. Kingdoms rise and fall faster than the generations that build them. Cities that once glittered under the sun, Akkad, Mohenjo-Daro, begin to crumble back into sand. But collapse is not sudden. It is slow, like breath leaving the body. Drought tightens its grip, trade routes falter, and famine breeds unrest. The strong turn on the weak, rulers tighten their fists, building monuments while their people starve. The same intelligence that once saved humanity now becomes its weapon: deception, conquest, manipulation. The dream of cooperation that began in the Ice Age fades into a contest for power. And yet, even as towers fall, something endures. In every ruined city, there are those who remember the old ways, the shepherds who still listen to the wind, the midwives who still thank the moon, the poets who still carve truth into clay. They sense that the earth is not angry, only wounded, and that what has been lost can still be remembered. Far from the cities, in the high mountains and deep forests, small communities survive as their ancestors once did. They hunt, gather, and live by the rhythm of the seasons. Around their fires, they tell stories of the cities, of pride, of punishment, of the hubris of men who forgot their roots. These are not tales of envy, but of warning, for they understand what the city dwellers do not, that progress without reverence is a form of blindness. The cycles continue. Civilizations fall, and new ones rise upon their bones. Egypt after Sumer, Greece after Crete, Rome after Carthage. Each inherits the wisdom and the blindness of the last. With every generation, humanity grows smarter, but forgets a little more of the silence that once defined it. The forests shrink, the seas fill with ships, and the air itself thickens with smoke and ambition. But even in the darkest moments, the wild refuses to vanish completely. In the heart of every person a memory stirs of rivers untouched, of starlit nights unbroken by walls, of the sound of the world breathing before mankind learned to drown it out. We feel it when we walk barefoot on the earth, when we watch the flame dance, when we hear thunder and feel, for a heartbeat, both fear and awe. That is the echo of who we were, the voice of 4 million years whispering through our veins, reminding us that civilization is not the opposite of nature, but its continuation, that the fire we command is the same fire that once terrified us, that the soil beneath our feet is older than our names, that progress without memory is merely another form of extinction. And so, as the empires crumble and new ones rise, the story of humanity continues, not as a straight line, but as a circle, always returning to the same truth that survival without gratitude is hollow, and that every wall we build stands on the bones of a world that once sheltered us freely. Somewhere on a quiet night, a man looks up from his field and sees the stars, the same stars his ancestors saw from the branches of ancient trees, and for a brief, silent moment, he feels the connection again. He does not speak, he does not write, but something in him remembers that once, long ago, life was not about power, but about wonder. And now, after millions of years of wandering through darkness and discovery, the long echo of our beginnings still trembles beneath our skin. The story that began in the grasslands by the glow of a trembling fire has not ended, it only changed shape. We walk upright through glass cities, we speak through machines that hum like the wind once did through the trees, and we touch the stars with hands that were once made to gather berries and shape stone. But no matter how far we travel, we are still bound to the same earth that cradled our ancestors. Their legacy is not the bones we unearth or the tools we display in museums. It is the invisible inheritance that beats within us. The instinct to protect our young, to share food, to build shelters, to create stories that make sense of chaos. These are not inventions of modern man, but memories from a time when survival itself was the only teacher. The compassion we feel when another suffers, the ache for meaning when we look to the stars, the thrill of firelight in the dark. All of these are ancient, carved into our blood long before words or empires existed. When we close our eyes at night, we dream as they once dreamed, of hunt and fire, of light and storm, of love and loss. Somewhere in the dreamscape of the human mind, the ancient savannah still breathes. The smell of rain on dust, the far-off roar of predators, the pulse of fear and courage, these sensations belong to every one of us, carried forward through unbroken generations. We may have forgotten the languages of the past, but our bodies remember. They remember the patience of the hunter, the reverence of the gatherer, the warmth of community in the cold. They remember that the world was once something to listen to, not to rule, that knowledge was shared, not owned, that the sacred was not above the earth but within it, in the spark of fire, the flow of water, the silence of stone. The first humans did not seek dominion over creation, they sought belonging within it. Their world was not divided into nature and man, for they were one and the same, a single voice in the great chorus of life. That is their greatest gift to us. The understanding that survival is not victory but harmony, that to endure is not merely to persist, but to live with gratitude. And though millennia have passed, their lessons still flicker quietly in the spaces between our modern noise. In the act of kindness to a stranger, in the moment we pause to watch a sunset, in the awe that grips us when thunder rolls, in the warmth that fills us when we gather by a fire. These are echoes of an ancient truth that refuses to die, that beneath our technology, our kingdoms, our ambition, we are still creatures of the earth, still children of the same trembling dawn. If the first humans could see us now, they might not understand our languages, our machines, or our cities, but they would understand the look in our eyes when we hold our children. They would know the hunger that drives us to create, the fear that makes us cling to each other in the dark, the small fire that burns in every human heart, the fire that once kept them alive in the cold night. That flame, passed from generation to generation, from the spark of lightning in a prehistoric storm to the electric glow of our modern world, is the single unbroken thread of our existence. It reminds us that we are not apart from nature's story. We are the story. And as we gaze into the future, uncertain of what lies ahead, we would do well to remember the truth our ancestors knew without words, that to survive is to respect the balance, to give back as much as we take, and to walk gently upon the earth that gave us life. For in the end, every empire will crumble, every invention will fade, every word will turn to dust, but the fire, the instinct, and the wonder that began 4.7 million years ago will remain, glowing quietly in the heart of humanity, as eternal as the stars under which we first learned to dream. Even as the noise of civilization swells and the towers of mankind pierce the horizon, there remains within us a quiet and unbroken current, an ancient pulse that hums beneath all progress and invention, reminding us that long before we built cities or carved our names into stone, we belonged to the wilderness. It is there in the wind that moves through the fields, carrying with it the scent of rain and memory. It is there in the stillness before dawn, when the first light touches the ground and the world seems to hold its breath. It is there in every moment when we stop, even briefly, to listen, truly listen to the sound of the earth breathing. That whisper of the wild calls to something wordless inside us, to that primal inheritance that once guided our ancestors across forests and deserts and endless plains, a longing not for comfort but for connection to the soil, to the stars, to the rhythm that all life once shared. It is why we stand mesmerized before a storm, why we watch waves crash with reverence, why we find peace beside a fire no matter how modern the world becomes. Beneath our language, our machinery, our architecture and our noise, there is still the same heartbeat that echoed in the chests of those who lived 4.7 million years ago, a slow, steady rhythm that reminds us we have never truly left the beginning. When the wind brushes against our skin or when the night sky unfolds in silence, the memory awakens, the memory of sleeping beneath trees, of following herds, of fearing the darkness but also learning to love its mystery. We recognize it without understanding why. It is not knowledge but feeling, not reason but recognition. The wild does not live beyond us. It lives within us, stitched into every breath, every instinct, every quiet moment of awe. And if we allow ourselves to listen, truly listen, we can still hear it, the whisper that says we were never meant to conquer this world, only to belong to it, that survival was never about mastery but harmony, that the oldest wisdom of all is gratitude. It asks nothing of us but remembrance, to look at the mountains and remember we are small, to touch the ground and remember we are temporary, to feel the fire's warmth and remember how far we have come. In that remembering, the past ceases to be distant. It becomes alive again, walking beside us like a shadow that never left. One day, when our towers fall quiet and our cities turn back to dust, when the last traces of our age are carried away by the wind and buried beneath the patient hands of time, the earth will continue as it always has, unhurried, unbroken, indifferent and yet profoundly alive. Rivers will carve new paths through forgotten ruins. Forests will return to places once paved and conquered, and life, wild, luminous and unrelenting, will reclaim the silence we filled with our noise. Perhaps some distant species, or perhaps our own descendants, will one day stand among those ruins and wonder who we were, just as we once looked upon the bones of those who came before and asked what it meant to be human. The truth, whispered across eons, is that we were never gods nor masters. only a fleeting chapter in a story much older than we can comprehend, the story of life learning itself, shaping itself, dreaming itself into existence again and again. Everything we are, our fears, our hopes, our inventions, our tenderness, was born from the same fragile spark that flickered in the darkness millions of years ago, the same fire that burned in the trembling hands of those who first dared to hold it. Their courage lives in us, their questions echo in our thoughts, their instinct to survive, to protect, to love, all of it endures, written not in books or monuments, but in our very blood. And perhaps that is the quiet miracle of it all, that despite everything we have built and destroyed, despite the empires and the machines and the endless march of progress, we still carry within us the same small flame that lit the faces of our ancestors beneath the ancient stars. It burns whenever we look at a sunrise and feel wonder instead of pride, whenever we hold another person's hand and understand, without words, that this connection is the meaning of survival, whenever we pause to feel the world moving beneath our feet and realize we are part of something vast, cyclical and eternal. The story that began with dust and hunger does not end with us. It continues endlessly through every living thing that dares to exist. The earth will outlast our arrogance, just as it outlasted their innocence, and still it will turn beneath the same constellations that once guided the first wanderers home. And perhaps that is enough, to know that for a brief and brilliant moment we were part of this great circle, that our breath was borrowed from the same wind that once moved through the grass of the ancient savannas, that the fire we hold is the same fire that once frightened and warmed the first humans, and that somewhere in the endless rhythm of creation and decay, the world will remember us, not for our walls or our wars, but for the quiet flame we carried through the darkness.